A decade ago, Rebekah Mercer was relatively unknown in conservative political circles. But in recent years, Mercer, the daughter of a reclusive billionaire, has shot to political prominence as an elite donor. She and her family have spent tens of millions of dollars on conservative causes and Republican candidates, including President Donald Trump. I want to bring in Matea Gold, who is a national political reporter for The Washington Post, and Zach Miter of Bloomberg Politics. Both of them have done extensive reporting on Rebekah Mercer, the Mercer family, and their rise in the political sphere. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here.
Let me start with you, Matea. Give us just some background here, a thumbnail sketch, if you will, on who Rebekah Mercer is.
Sure. So Rebekah Mercer is the middle daughter of New York hedge fund executive Robert Mercer. Of his three daughters, she really shares his political interests and focus. And she, in the last several years, has really emerged as a person in the family who's spearheading their political investments. She really came into the fore, I think, in the wake of the 2012 elections, when the Mercers were extremely disappointed in the loss of Mitt Romney and the amount of money they put in to support his candidacy. And I think what's interesting is that she and her father in some ways are very similar to other conservative donors, in which they share a sense that the federal government is too bloated and is really a threat to personal liberty. They would like to see a rollback of regulations, but it's their tactics to influence the political process that I think really sets them apart.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more, Zach, because the tactics are what seem to be different here, because we're not just talking about traditional avenues that other donors, mega donors, have used to influence politics, but also really the media here. That's a different approach. You've written about, for instance, Clinton Cash. Tell us about that book.
Sure. So in recent years, the Mercers used Steve Bannon, now a top advisor to President Trump, as a kind of advisor. And Bannon had like this two-pronged strategy to kind of change the culture of the country. And half of it was sort of the mainstream approach, using this institution called the Government Accountability Institute to kind of dig up dirt against people like the Clintons and then weaponize it by giving it to the mainstream media. And then there was the other half of that approach, which was Breitbart News, which was sort of for the true believer, populist, nationalist, conservative. And the Mercers funded the Institute and also were huge investors in Breitbart News.
And so let's go fast forward, Matea, to just after the Republican primary, or actually during the Republican primary, just after Senator Ted Cruz suspended his campaign. This was someone that Rebekah Mercer supported. Instead of, though, just giving up, she didn't decide to do that. Tell us what happened at that point.
Right. The Mercers had put more than $13 million into their personal family super PAC to support Cruz, but they really did not miss a beat when he dropped out of the race, and they fairly quickly realigned their support to Trump. And as Zach mentioned, they had already been really making a hard press to kind of shape the environment of the campaign in a critique of Hillary Clinton through Breitbart and Clinton Cash and GAI. But they also reconfigured their family super PAC to support Trump, and also very quickly became part of Trump's kitchen cabinet. And, you know, at this point, he did not have a lot of senior people from the donor world who had been part of that circle. They quickly inserted themselves there and were in a position to really shape the direction of his campaign leadership when he had a lot of tumult that summer. And both Rebekah Mercer and Bob Mercer urged him to bring in Stephen Bannon and Kellyanne Conway, who we now know are in the White House advising Trump. And there's really a very strong link there between their advice to Trump and his decision to bring them on.
And let's talk also about Cambridge Analytica. This is the data firm that was used. Talk to me, Zach, about the role that the Mercers played in getting the Trump campaign specifically to hire this polling firm, which many say now, looking back on that victory by Donald Trump, was really responsible for identifying voters that other pollsters missed.
Right, so the Mercers back in 2013, so this is again the time period just after the sort of licking their wounds from losing the 2012 presidential election. They also make a big investment in Cambridge Analytica, which at the time was a British firm, hadn't been involved in U.S. politics before. and they almost became sort of its bank in the U.S. They started supporting a lot of political operations with the strings attached that you've got to use our data operation. And that ultimately, that logic continued up through the Trump campaign. Once they became Trump supporters, Trump also hired Cambridge Analytica. Now, its actual effectiveness in the campaign is a matter of great dispute among Republican operatives who worked on that campaign and also outside the campaign. Some people say it helped. Others say it was mostly other people.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, Matea, you mentioned some of the political values that the Mercer family espouses, limited government, rolling back some regulations. But now that Donald Trump is in the White House, what is the political endgame here for the Mercer family?
Right. So it's a little tricky to discern exactly their agenda because they refuse to speak to the media or give any interviews. So we really have to analyze their investments to get a sense of where they're putting their focus. And last week I attended a conference here in Washington sponsored by the Heartland Institute where the Mercers were in attendance. And this was really a two-day showcase of scientists who advocate against the prevailing wisdom that humans indeed are contributing to global warming. The Mercers have supported the Heartland Institute. It appears they continue to support it. And as we saw today, President Trump is rolling back Obama-era climate regulations. That seems to be something that the Mercers are very much in favor of. And so one thing that is striking looking at their investments is they don't just put money into groups focused on climate, for example. They really have an array of investments, both in the foreign policy space, in the general free market space, groups focused on social issues. So it appears they're really attempting to have a hand in sort of across the conservative firmament.
All right, last question, Zach. I'm going to ask you about this party, after party really, that you were privy to here. So the Mercers hold a costume party every year, yes?
That's right.
And so it's sort of a veritable who's who in conservative circles?
Yes, especially of this sort of new conservative world we're seeing of kind of the populist nationalist Steve Bannon. It's a group that 5 years ago you wouldn't associate with the Republican establishment, but this year it kind of was.
And it was an anti-establishment crowd. Just give us a sense before we let you go here. Who was there? What was Rebekah Mercer dressed as? Donald Trump showed up to this as well.
Donald Trump showed up. He was there. He did not wear a costume. Peter Thiel, Trump's biggest fan in Silicon Valley, came dressed as Hulk Hogan, who he had supported in this lawsuit. And, Nigel Farage, the guy behind Brexit, was there dressed as Lord Admiral Nelson. And Rebekah Mercer was there dressed as a comic book character, the Black Widow, in skin-tight leather outfit.
All right, with that, my thanks to Matea Gold in Washington and Zach Miter here in New York. Really great reporting. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure.